The Chronicles of Narnia, written by C.S. Lewis, has 7 volumes and is adored by kids and adults alike. However, despite worldwide fame, there have only been 3 live-action adaptations of Lewis's novels, which were somewhat divisive to the fandom. Now, if you want to go into more about the background of production, budget, and even the history of 2000's Disney corporate greed, make sure to go check out this video by a great creator called Captain Midnight, where he explains those things much better than I could. Here in this video, I want to talk more about the storytelling, script writing, and even acting that's valuable in understanding why the series ended so abruptly with the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Even as a little kid watching these movies from a DVD collection, I could always tell something was different, and to that point less likable about the third film from its 2 predecessors. Something about the pacing, the shots, even the acting was just off. I remember looking on the back of the DVD cases and finding out, of course they feel different. They were directed by 2 different people. The first 2 were directed by one man, Andrew Adamson, and the third was directed by Michael Apted. Both of these guys actually have some really good films under their belt, and it blew my mind that Andrew Adamson actually directed Shrek. Yes, the very same guy who made this. Mind blown. Also, his Wikipedia page lists him as a DJ, so that's pretty cool. All that to say, now coming back to these films in my early 20s, I decided to give it a closer look. I wasn't satisfied to chalking it all up to directorial changes. I genuinely really enjoyed these movies when I was younger, and I was sad to see it end. Now, despite what I'll say in the rest of the video, not all of this is the fault of the director/writers and corporations. In fact, one of the biggest reasons that I think this franchise was ultimately doomed from the get-go is that the story is laid out by Lewis not to retain the characters. Purely from the source material itself, the main 4 Pevensey children only last for 3 books, and the older 2 aren't even in the 3rd, which is so unfortunate because these are the characters that we've learned to care about. However, it's integral to the point of C.S. Lewis's work as a whole that humans were never meant to stay in Narnia. Narnia is ultimately a temporary world for them to essentially mature in over time. And that's a cool thing, that's a beautiful concept. Unfortunately, in terms of investment in characters, it falls a little flat in that regard. I feel the same way about a lot of film, especially like long-running TV shows. For instance, House. Great doctor show with Hugh Laurie, who is a fantastic actor. However, once the original trio of doctors under his guise step out of the picture for the most part, the show really lost its edge for me. What I really enjoyed was the dynamic between the characters who were flawed and yet somehow still likable. That's what set it apart for me, and I can find my share of a number of doctor shows, but I don't really care about the doctor stuff as much as I care about the characters. So bringing it back to Narnia, I really don't care about this loser Eustace, and I don't particularly care about all the Minotaurs and Telmarines and stuff. I really care about the characters, Peter and Susan and their complex family which struggles to make their way through a world that needs them. That's why I say this series was sort of doomed from the start. No matter how they swung it, eventually the characters that people loved would be gone, and they would either have to make you care about a new character, which did not work, or they would have to end the series. Now, in the case of this trilogy, the biggest difference I find in the first 2 films versus the last one is this. In the first 2 movies, you feel like you're being showed a story, whereas in the last, you feel like you're being told a story. The first 2 movies are written and directed in a way that even as I was rewatching them for this video, I noticed things that I had never thought about before the 100 times I watched them as a kid. For instance, in the very opening scene of the first film, the swastikas and garbled German give away that the Nazi bombers are coming for the British. As soon as we cut to that house down below, we see Edmund almost smiling, really in awe of the power and chaos, which is such an integral part of his character and the arc in this movie. Honestly, this entire first scene is so well done. It perfectly sets up the dynamic for not having 1, but 4 main characters who each go through their own arc throughout the duration of the movie. Edmund is enticed by power and mystery, Peter acts as a father figure in lieu of their real father who's at war, Susan is set up as a worrying, cynical older sister, and Lucy is the innocent, frightened youngest sibling. Even the fact that Edmund runs back in for a picture of their father is so integral to understanding his personality and why he does what he does in the plot. The second film, Prince Caspian, starts in a similar way, this time having the action start as Caspian's aunt gives birth and King Miras tries to assassinate him. Even the tiny little dialogue that occurs is so chilling and potent that nothing else is needed. Like when the professor says this to Caspian.
What's going on? Your aunt has given birth to a son.
We know exactly what he means. This is not good for Caspian, and you can see it on his face. Throwing us right into the action is a great way to get the audience hooked and feel like we're about to start a new adventure. Oh, he has the horn? That must mean we're in Narnia. Why are the woods so creepy? It's because of the Narnians. None of that is dialogue, but the audience just gets it. And yet, Voyage of the Dawn Treader is where we fall short again. It starts with Edmund trying to enlist in the British military, which, first of all, doesn't seem very much like his character that we've established in the prior two movies. And then he just goes off and tells Lucy on this tirade about how he's supposed to be a king and he deserves more respect. Now, I will say that this scene does set up both characters' central struggle in the film, Lucy with her beauty and Edmund with his pride, but the writing does it in such a way that it's so obvious, it just feels forced and unwarranted. And Eustace as well. The next scene is him writing in his journal about how much he hates the Pevensey siblings and all that, which might work in another type of film, but in this series where there's never been a narrator before, it's really striking. Another thing the first two films fundamentally understood better is how to create a compelling character arc. And for 4 distinct main characters even. I struggle to write 2 in my own screenplays, but 4? The first film does this best out of all 3 by far, but I would argue that Prince Caspian still does it better than Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Again, even though it's never explicitly stated, each sibling has something that they learn over the course of the film. Additionally, for the first 3 that receive gifts from Santa, even though they never call him Santa, we just know, again, good writing, they have their development tied to the gifts they're given. Peter learns to be a good leader and to have grace for his younger brother, and I think the sword and shield are a good representation of that dichotomy. Susan learns to trust, which is radically different from how cynical she was at the beginning of the film. Her bow is the representation of that, and Santa even tells her if she trusts it, it will not easily miss. You can see the completion of that arc when she shoots the dwarf that's trying to kill Edmund at the end of the movie. Edmund, I think, has the most compelling arc, wanting power and a quick way to the top through the witch, which he inevitably sees the flaw in and is the reason Aslan sacrificed himself for Edmund. Lucy also gets her vial and dagger, which seem to be a representation of both her care for people and the bravery that she has to attain over the course of the story. In Voyage of the Dawn Treader, however, it feels like they're scraping the bottom of the bucket for ways to be engaging. Let me also just say, what on earth did they do to Caspian? For a long time, I genuinely thought they had changed the actor. His beard and his accent are so drastically different from the last film that I genuinely felt like he was a new character. But nope, it's the same guy, same character, same actor. He also shares very little with himself from the previous film, and he just comes across as shallow and bland. All of that culminates to a really emotionally flat finale for his character at the edge of Aslan's country. Lucy's character arc, I suppose, is just that she wants to be beautiful like her sister Susan. And don't get me wrong, sisterly jealousy is a factor that can be really well done, but when the sister isn't even in the picture anymore, it makes the conflict much less engaging. I do appreciate that we get to see this loving, caring instinct that she's always had as part of her character when she takes care of the little girl Gale. However, it just doesn't really give us a payoff. And at the end of the film, I feel like nothing happened. It wasn't resolved. There is this one scene where she tries the spell, and then Aslan tells her that she essentially whisked herself away. It was kind of a poor scene, to say the least. I don't understand why Aslan comes and gives her a little pep talk here, and then she tells Gale later that she just needs to be like herself, which I guess is the logical conclusion, but we never see her arrive at that herself. She's just told what to think and then instantly believes it. Thanks, Aslan. Part of the whole crux of these movies is that they don't trust Aslan to some degree, and that's what causes issues. But on this one issue that she spent the whole movie fighting, it's just resolved? I just don't buy it. As a side note, I think they really misunderstand the point of Aslan's character in this movie. He's just kind of used as something that fixes everything. Which, if you're looking at it from the perspective of what actually happens, yes, in the first 2 movies he does solve all the problems. But he's not a genie. He only comes in and saves them once they've reached the end of themselves, especially after they've learned something. All that said, Edmund, though, is the one that feels the most flat in this movie. For the character with the best arc in the first movie, I honestly can't tell what his arc is in this one. The closest thing I can think of is that he's just tired of living in people's shadow, which, again, is something that we've just blatantly said instead of hinted at. But that even doesn't seem to last long aside from this one scene at the Deathwater pool. Let me just say, if that is the crux of his development through the film, that's completely regressive to his character. That's something he most definitely figured out in the first 2 movies. He learned to live in humility and with respect for his brother Peter, which of course should logically transfer over to the kinghood of Caspian. Again, it's just regressive, and rehashes that struggle in an infinitely less compelling way than the first 2 movies. One of the best parts about the first 2 movies is the score. There are 2 songs that I will never forget the melody to. The first is this song that plays as they board the train to the professor's house. It's just perfect, so mysterious, and it recurs a couple times throughout the movie. The second is at the end of Prince Caspian, a song called The Call by Regina Spektor. I guarantee you that right now that song is unironically in my Spotify playlists. Yeah, I'm kind of a sappy guy. Honestly, Andrew Adamson did a killer job on selecting songs for these soundtracks. Then again, he did direct Shrek, which might have the most iconic song of all time.
Somebody
Unfortunately, the score for the third film is completely bland. The first two created an iconic vibe for each of their own films, and this movie is just ultimately unmemorable. One of the coolest parts, at least of the first two movies, is of course the battle scenes, which are another place where the third movie falls flat, almost exclusively due to the source material itself. Of course, due to the nature of the plot, it's impossible for there to have been a war scene like the first two. I guess the final battle with the sea monster was kinda cool, but it really didn't have the stakes that the first two films set in place, and it felt a bit forced. But just take a look at the first two films. Can I just take a second to brag on these fight scenes? They're great in their respective ways. Like the first movie's final battle, this build-up between two massive armies charging against each other with contrasting color schemes, and the crescendo of the score up to silence right as they collide. What a bold choice, and it's done so well, immaculately. Just watch it. I'm gonna play it for you. Man, what a payoff! It just blows my mind the way the director used a moment of complete silence to capture such a captivating moment. Prince Caspian is similar with some really cool battle tactics and even a sneaky first battle at the castle for a change of pace. This one has a lot more strategy involved and it feels more mature just like the characters are. But unfortunately, again, due to its plotline, it was almost impossible to integrate something like this into the third movie. All that said, the first two films are not perfect. Here's a quick snapshot of some of the things I disliked in the first two movies. 1. The siblings are way too over-the-top hard on Edmund. I get that it sets up his ultimate betrayal, but like, they are so rude to him and it just doesn't seem realistic. Even for these kids who are apart from their family and stuff, there are some lines that I'm just like, man, these kids are awful. Another thing, I really wanted Edmund to have some reconciliation with Tumnus at the end. After all, he's the one who got him arrested and turned into stone, but we just never see that in the movies. One thing I disliked about Prince Caspian is that Susan has almost no character development, in my opinion. In addition, the romance between her and Caspian seems really forced. Also, this is just kind of a nitpicky thing, but some of the background CGI and makeup is not great. But I mean, I guess for the time it was okay. Honestly, that's about all I can think of for now. For the first two movies at least, all the good stuff vastly outweighs the bad, namely all the subtleties. For instance, where Edmund steps on this picture of Tumnus' father when he ran into the house at the beginning of the movie to get a picture of his own father. That kind of writing and visual storytelling is just peak. These films are full of a lot of really good emotional scenes. One of my absolute favorites has to be where Caspian spares the life of King Miras, the man he wanted to kill so much before. The man who killed his father! Or in the first movie, where they have tons of well-written scenes about how the dynamic of a family would look like in this situation. Honestly, the more I think about it, these first two movies are the kind of things I aspire to write as an author. They're just excellent. Now that we got the good stuff out of the way, let's talk about some of my big problems with the third movie. As I said, the score is not good. All of Eustace's character development happens when he's an awful CGI dragon, so that's garbage. The dialogue seems really forced. How dare they change Reepicheep's voice actor? He was perfect.
Yes, I'm a mouse. Yeah!
Why on earth did they change this man's accent? The first mate is introduced almost as a villain, which is really distracting from the plot. There is so much unnecessary dialogue. Okay, you're telling me that the oppressor was in this room the entire time, and he didn't turn around and see Lucy using his book? What is up with the costume design? Like, what is this? And finally, the most insulting part of this movie is the atrocious motivational speech that Caspian gives right before they enter the dark place. Alright, I could go on, but I'm gonna stop there. You get the idea. To be fair to Voyage of the Dawn Treader, there are some good things about this movie. Not nearly as many, but some. For instance, at the beginning of the movie, the cinematography is really good. Just gorgeous shots of these high seas, they're great to look at. There are some subtleties that are nice too, like the school hygiene award that you can see Eustace has, which he mentions later in the movie. I do really like Eustace and Reepicheep's relationship, even if all the good parts are while Eustace is this ugly beast. Also, the CGI sucks, but I already said that. Then again, Eustace can't talk while he's a dragon, so I've greatly appreciated the respite from his grating voice. Also, I sort of mentioned this earlier, but I really like that Lucy gets to be sort of an older sister to this girl Gale. Honestly, that should have been what the writers focused on for her, not her weird obsession to look exactly like her sister. One thing I also really appreciate about the film is that there were a lot of themes and dialogue that's true to the novels and to Lewis's writing. Like when Aslan says this at the end of the film.
In your world, I have another name. You must learn to know me by it.
That sort of standard Christian theology was absolutely crucial to C.S. Lewis's writing, and no matter what you believe, that is one of the key tenets of the Narnia universe. Aslan's sacrificial love for Edmund is obviously reflective of Christ's death for humanity. Lewis himself said, "Supposing there were really a world like Narnia, and supposing Christ wanted to go into that world and save it as he did ours, what might have happened?" Additionally, instead of calling this an allegory, he calls it a supposal, just imagining what it would have looked like for Aslan, Jesus, to come into Narnia. Like, despite most of this movie being pretty emotionally flat, the very end where Aslan tells them about Narnia and the real purpose behind it and what his country is like, that dialogue is so loyal to the theme of the books and to Lewis himself. Again, I would say the first two movies do that even better, but I am very glad that that's not a part that they got rid of in the third movie. Unfortunately, a perfect storm of plot and bad acting and directorial changes seem to have made it so that this story is never going to be made into a full-length adaptation. At least a live-action one, that is. What do you guys think? Did you watch these movies as a kid? If you did, let me know down in the comments below, and let me know any other thoughts you have about this video and about the series. Well folks, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, all that good stuff. More content is coming soon, and I will catch you in the next one.